Now let's write a little more action script that's going to correctly specify the poly parrot inside the cage. Option F9 again, or F9 on the PC. I have the cage selected, so I'll just switch back to actions. Remember that panel down here allows me to move my selection around. And while I'm at it, I might as well go ahead and pin this so we won't have to bounce back and forth from that in the future. Let's write one that's going to access the poly in the cage. Now, here's what I mean by a path. I'm going to start out by typing the name of the first element on the timeline, cage, followed by a dot, followed by poly, followed by a dot, and now I've correctly specified the who part of my dot syntax statement. I can go ahead and add some other variable here. I'll set a Y scale, and just so we can see the difference, I'm going to set this one equal to 50. Now that should make poly half the size that she originally was. Let's test our movie. Command return or control enter, and you can see I've got one tall poly and one short one. So our dot syntax is more than just pulling the name out. We actually have to correctly specify the name via its complete path inside our movie file. Now a lot of you have used a path system before, and if this will help to make it easier to understand, we can think of it in terms of our Macintosh or Windows operating system. Whenever you're specifying a file location on the hard drive, you're using something similar, but you're using slash notation. You're separating out the containers or the folders by slashes and going all the way down till you have a correct path for each object on your hard drive. Another example of this is simple HTML linking. Again, you're using slashes to separate containers from the objects you're trying to point out. And in this case, you could almost think of the cage as a container for that poly that's in there. So any movie clip can act like a container or a folder, and we're going to specify it in dot notation exactly that way. Let's try this one more time just so we get it clear. I'm going to close up our preview window and I'll press Option F9. And what I'd like to do next is I'd like to take the bird cage here and let's pull one into the pole that's on the ground. Now if I click on the pole, let's see if we got it there. It looks like we got it in a locked layer. So I'll unlock that layer. I'll click on the pole and you can see it's a movie clip. I'll double click on it. And I'll pull the bird cage right on into it. I'll just set it up in another layer. So we'll set another layer for the cage here inside that movie clip. And while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and name that one the pole so we know what it is. On our cage layer, we're going to drag a copy of the bird cage movie clip right in there. Okay. Now, I'm just going to scale that down a little bit so it fits the perspective that we're looking at. So I'll just use my scale tool. I'll pull that in and I'll hold shift down to make sure we get the constraint on it. And now I can kind of hang that cage there off of its little hook right there on the pole. Now if we take a look at the structure that we've just built, we have the parrot inside the cage in two locations. But this cage is inside the pole movie clip. So let's go back to scene one. Let's bring up our action script, and I'd like to make a modification to this parrot inside the page. Now remember, we named the cage here, Cage, and I'm just going to check my Movie Explorer window to take a look at what we've got now. Now I can see one little problem that we're going to have to deal with, and that is the pole currently does not have an instance name, so we'll need an instance name on it. And in order to be able to work our path all the way down through the bird cage to the parrot, I'll need to have this bird cage have a name as well. Once again, I'm going to use the same name we used before, and I'm hoping that doesn't confuse anybody. Typically, you'd use unique names there just to make sure that you don't confuse yourself, but wanted to make that point of the path here. So let's go change those names. I'm going to double-click inside the pole movie clip first of all, and I'm going to click on the cage and name the instance of the cage. I'll call it Cage. And going back to scene one, let's click on the instance of the pole. Now that's the movie clip that contains the cage and the bird. It needs an instance name as well. We'll just call it Pole. Now let's write some action script to access that parrot inside. I'll click on my actions frame, and I'm going to press Option F9 to bring up my actions window. And we'll write one more line of script down here at the bottom. We need to start at pole, followed by a dot, followed by cage, and then finally poly. Now for this one, I'm just going to make the bird fat. So we'll take a property similar to the _y scale. We'll do _x scale this time. And we'll set it equal to 200, so it'll be twice as wide as it was before. Let's do a quick test of our movie. Command return or control enter on the PC, and you can see we've got a very fat bird here sticking out of the cage, a short bird, and a tall bird.